Right, hello everyone, it's Monday what's the date? I don't know. But it's TVP UK Study Session FAQ 106, 107 and 108. Thank you, Lilith, it is the 18th of January 2016. So what we're going to do this week, and thanks to all the guys for being here, we've got a good crowd. So what we do is we go through these FAQ questions which are on the Venus Project's website, and kind of before the Hangouts, or if you guys haven't kind of prepared anything, which is fine, I haven't told you all about this, we'll maybe kind of try and think of how you would answer this question if someone asked it you in the street. And we'll just kind of compare our answers and then cross-reference it with the answer that's on the website to kind of check our understanding. And it's also really good because it just kind of pops up these questions that you might have, like just about something that you maybe don't understand, or a really wicked question that someone might want to ask you. How can you try and answer it? So feel free to raise all of those as we go along, and we'll generally be going down the sheet which I've shared in the right, but just in case, because I think a few people have dropped in and out, the link is there on the right, and if you scroll down to FAQ 106, we'll start from there. And the question 106 is, what is your take regarding sexuality? And kind of from this we mean, what's the Venus Project stance on sexuality? How will sexuality kind of be involved in a resource-based economy kind of thing? So, Mick, are you still mid-eating?
No, don't worry, I've finished my mouthful. Yes. So yeah, I just put have sex, enjoy it. I can't see any problems.
Sure. So we'll go down the sheet. So I think Andy, you entered next.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if it was really that relevant to what the sort of things that they talk about usually with TVP. So I just thought, I think that a lot of people that actually follow this sort of thing, they'll probably already have an opinion sort of based around saying, oh, well, it doesn't really matter because it's whatever you want to do. So it's your choice. Shouldn't be anybody else's that's dictating what you do, unless you're doing something that's like without consent or something. But other than that, I think like shouldn't be homophobic or anything. You know, so I don't think it's that much to do with the Venus Project. But I think that I'm open to anybody what they want to do. You know, as long as it's to do with consent.
No, good answer. Some of these questions, you just answer them simply. Like, it doesn't need to be all complicated. Some of the later ones are a bit more interesting, so that's fine. My answer was nothing harmful, I guess, without consent. And acceptance and understanding would kind of be embedded in the culture. It would be part of like everyday life. So that there shouldn't really be any problems about this. And who was next? Nick?
Yeah, someone's sexuality is their personal preference, but I do think in a resource-based economy there would be less hype placed on sex and sexuality, along with better understanding of physical and emotional needs.
Very good point. No sexy advertising. That'll be the day.
Sorry, I see that Harry just typed, what about paedophiles? Is that acceptable? And, obviously not. But I think that a lot of sexual deviance is to do with our culture and not necessarily something that is something that someone's going to do anyway. We don't define what is and isn't allowed. We educate, I believe, is the answer for that. No, shut up now.
No, Harry's throwing some good questions. Andy, you had a star?
Yep. Yeah, I think the bit about paedophilia, obviously, it's like that's to do with consent and stuff. Like, obviously, they're not going to want it, or if you're a child. And obviously, even with consent though, as well, it's obviously not right. They do it anyways, and I'm sure most people will think that. But yeah, it's obviously that's one of the things that goes against, like saying that anybody can do what they want. Think whatever sexual preference or whatever. It's different in that regard, but other than that, as long as it's ethical, or whatever you want to call it.
I think defining what is isn't allowed is down to the fact that a child's brain is not developed enough to make a conscious choice towards whether they decide to partake in the sexual act. It's like a baby can go, oh yes, you know, but you need to wait until the brain is fully matured to understand these situations to then dictate whether they can give or not give consent. Well, you just look at scientific evidence. If you need to bring scientific evidence into that. I don't know, mate.
That's it. There might be knowledge, but you got to kind of look at what we define today, and I don't know. I think in a time where there is no law, but there's still kind of what a society would deem acceptable, and what that would be at that time is based on that environment. So it's hard to speculate. But I would think that paedophilia is not going to be cool. What I see is you got to, like, who defines that it's not okay is very tough. It's not something I'm going to be drawing on right now, but you find alternatives for people, you find help for the people, and you don't like lock them away, you don't demonize them. Is it possible for a city to decide to not to have something?
Shall I just explain? Because like this is kind of fundamentally what's confusing me sometimes about the Venus Project is that you have like a community of a city, say I don't know how they're supposed to be, like 2,000 or something like that, and that city kind of decides on its own what is and isn't acceptable. I'm sure that most cities, as we've all agreed on, probably that wouldn't accept paedophilia as one of its things that are allowed. But it begs the question, like, over a period of time, eventually some cities will decide, for example, that is acceptable, and you'll have this kind of evolution principle happening to each city, as in what happens to the cell and organisms on the planet, and like it makes you question like what are kind of the limits to that? How do we sort of like, do we have any control, or how is the Venus Project designed in a way that limits those kind of things like paedophilia from existing, or radical beliefs existing, or is that still acceptable to have that if people choose to have that in their societies? I don't know. It's a complicated question.
May I? I'm only asking because the star went after Aiden, that's all. Yeah, so first, great question, but very critical is to decide. This is the rhetoric that Jacques tries to bypass by introducing words like arrive at. And arrive at is exactly what I think Ryan said, scientific evidence, and then I think again, Harry, you asked, is there any? Great question. First, let's investigate. I've never fucking even heard that anybody done any kind of actual scientific study on what is a pedophile. Is that stuff in the brain? If so, did the motherfucker have some specific diet? Was the guy hurt in childhood? Witness a murder or some shit like James Gilligan suggests? Many of these very warped behaviors have kind of deep roots in your childhood. So basically the answer to these, I don't know. Can I find out? Yes or no, you go from there. If no, you either don't investigate or you don't know how to investigate it for now, and the problem either persists or it doesn't. And if you do, then that's where you will start to find out the mechanics of how. There's literally books written about how to do research. Never read one of them, by the way, just to make it clear, okay? I'm not some guy who has these answers for you. What I do have, though, is numerous hours of having watched Jacques talk about a very specific point of view, which is scientifically oriented. It's all well and good to say, it's not right, it's not moral. According to whom? Greeks fucked everybody in the goddamn site. They had things like vomitariums, praised like the most intellectual culture ever to have existed in the world. Okay, is that,
benefiting the society in such a way where we can blank kids getting fucked? Clearly not. Not in today's world. As you suggested, is there some city in the future which is going to evolve into something that does consent pedophilia? First of all, if it is a future city, is the word pedophilia even going to be used? Or do we understand that there's going to be specific terminology used to define exactly what goes on in the brain or not in the brain, in the gut, maybe in the dick, maybe it's triggers, and if so, the triggers are clearly going to be manipulated as to not trigger such an event. So there's a lot of research that needs to be done. And so while I now can definitely confidently say I've not even investigated this, I don't know how these things manifest, but there are people who do. And if not, they have a pretty good idea, or at least a hypothesis, and things flow from there. So the key is, do we have resources, man and raw, in order to complete these studies? I suppose time will tell, because right now I just really don't know. But these things of what is or isn't allowed, or do we decide, do we not decide, what does the science tell us? That really is it. And as far as in concerns to feelings and morality that comes from things like philosophy and religion, these things are not usually very referential. They go by their gut feelings, or I don't think this should be right. But then what if a Japanese person thinks it is right? You know what I mean? So if we have descriptive language about stuff, if we refrain from judgments and vested interests and essentially just bad grammar, which is non-referential and it doesn't actually define things that go on, then we are apt to find more accurate results. Good or bad, that's value judgments. If we look at what the data tells us, we'll find out much more about what the events are. I hope this helps at least a bit.
I think nearly everybody's touched on everything that I'm going to explain there. So when it comes to, I think Nick mentioned culture influencing behavior. So the amount of fucking sex that we have pumped out through radio or TV, that's one big thing that will change, hopefully. Education about sex, so making sure everybody understands everybody's behaviours, what a traumatic experience, I think Andy's just touched on it, can cause to somebody if they're abused when they're not consented to sex when they're a child. So obviously that's going to cause aberrant behaviours which you don't want. And then Ludus has just gone into investigating what causes paedophilia, what is it defined, and how do we stop something that can cause aberrant behaviours in people. So yeah, that's all I had to say.
I think Ludus mentioned the morality thing, which it's a very important factor. I mean, paedophilia is an emotive subject, so immediately, as I'm sort of reading, in the chat, it's sort of well, we can't have paedophilia, that shouldn't be allowed in the new world or whatever, and the age at which you're allowed to have sex with someone historically has been influenced by religion. There's countries where in Africa now, even today, where women will be married at 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, and it's normal. It's not considered, so if a 12-year-old marries a 20-year-old, that's not considered he's a paedophile. That's considered a relationship, a marriage, and they have children. And, potentially if they don't die of starvation, because it's obviously, these sort of things don't happen in a developing, in a developed world, just in a developing world, but they can have a lifetime together. So it's very much about when we answer these questions, we're dealing with what we think is normal in the society we're living in. You know, if I was sitting here in Africa having this conversation, you know, then I could have, you know, a few years ago, you know, I could have been married to a 12-year-old, and, you know, when I was younger, obviously, you know, but, or maybe even today, if I wanted, if I was living there, you know, it's all about your perception at the time and what's considered normal. And we're obviously, you know, like in the resource-based economy, what is going to be considered normal will be, you know, perhaps a whole heap different from what goes on today. That's not to say that paedophilia will be something that is happening, but it's something that we would be, you know, we would be more familiar with our bodies and our sexuality and more emotionally equipped to deal with those, with our needs, without forcing ourselves upon anyone, I'm sure.
Alright guys, sorry to Andy and Huey, I'm going to cut across you on the star, and just kind of, I think we've tapped on a whole load of things here, and pretty much answered this quite well. So Mick, if you'd like to read the actual answer off the website.
Cool. So, TVP FAQ 106, what is your take regarding sexuality? We view the facts of sex are as follows. If children are raised in an environment where nude swimming is the norm, then their sexual attitudes and behaviours will evolve differently than in situations where the bodies are always covered and hidden. Aberrant sexual behaviour and fetishes would probably disappear in cultures where unclothed bodies are regarded as natural. Deviant sexual behaviours like peeping toms, selling nudity in magazines, exhibitionism and similar activities are mostly generated in societies where sex is covert and people are deprived about it. Unfortunately, much religious training seeks to perpetuate conventional sexual attitudes with particular emphasis on feelings of guilt. Societies which accept unscientific values and beliefs about sex are bound to generate unhealthy deviations involving cruelty, sadism, etc. Sexual attitudes and behaviours in a saner society will evolve very differently from conventional societies today. We think nudity will become more commonplace on beaches, parks and elsewhere, and that this will, in fact, become the norm in the future. Non-judgmental attitudes about sexual preference will eventually prevail. Sex in the culture will lack inhibition, thus reducing the interest in dancing girls, enticing displays, sexual extravagance, etc. Sexual distortions and abnormalities result from judgmental religious concepts regarding nudity and sexual preference. Jack Fresco, founder of the Venus Project, once lived in a Polynesian island in the South Pacific where the natives wore no clothing. This was associated with a completely different value system concerning sex and nudity. They did not behave like people do in a sexually deprived culture. The males didn't stare at the female body, but rather looked into their eyes when speaking to them. During sex, they stroked their entire body. When you pet a dog, you don't stop at the balls. You stroke the entire dog. They were uninterested in photos of nudes, male or female. They didn't brag about sexual conquests or emphasize their sexual behavior, and it appeared to be as natural as any other activity among them. They engaged in sex when they were old enough to do so, and did so without cruelty or fetishes. Those distortions mostly occur in modern civilization, where deprivation and sexual morality are dominant. The Venus Project feels that sexual preferences are byproducts of a person's experiences, and we make no judgments regarding those preferences. Our aim is to find out what conditions are responsible for deviant behaviour in all aspects of society, and then to scientifically design an environment that will evolve the best in human values and relationships. A better social design in a resource-based economy will evolve productive and cooperative citizens. I don't know about anybody else, but when it come up with when you pet a dog, you don't stop at the balls, you stroke the entire dog. Who strokes a dog's balls?
I don't know. Thank you, Mick. It was really good reading. I think it answered it. It didn't touch on paedophilia. I was hoping it maybe did. but it didn't really. Do any of you guys?
Sexual deviations, though.
Mhm. So, do any of you guys have anything to say, kind of, with that in context with what we've been discussing?
I think it did touch on paedophilia, but I don't think it named it. It said, our aim is to find out what conditions are responsible for deviant behaviour in all aspects of society. So I know it didn't target paedophilia there. I think though that I think Andy said it in the chat that obviously paedophilia can cause aberrant behaviour in people. So I think yeah, we need to be looking into the harm that it can do.
Oh shit! Sorry. Here.
Okay, I was just going to say that I found that interesting, the part about selling. They sell a lot of sexual stuff, and it's interesting because kids are not educated on sex. We hide information from them, and if you hide information, you can sell things when they grow up, and because they're curious about it. And if we didn't hide it, we educated from the very beginning, we couldn't sell probably. Like if we expose them, if they bathed with friends or whatever naked, we could probably sell anything because they would be very familiar. What's the point? Like the natives in the Polynesian island. What's the point? They struck the whole female, didn't stare at the bodies. You couldn't sell anything there because they were exposed to that. It was normal. There was no mystery around it. No, nothing to hide. So that's an interesting bit I found.
Nice. Hi, Stefan. Or Stephen. Hope that is tasty. So, was that about it? Should we go on to the next question?
Yeah. I just wanted to quickly.
Oh, sorry.
Sure. Quickly add. To me personally, when Mick, when you identified that it touched on it, but you just chose a different paragraph, I would say the first one to me is what. So, first paragraph. Second sentence, I think. Deviant sexual behaviors like peep and tom, selling nudity in magazines, blah, blah, blah. Oh, so somebody else actually referred to it. Okay, well then, yeah, it's all settled. It's all good.
I just wanted to say that I think one thing that isn't touched on, and one study I read actually about homosexuals. Funnily enough, if you're so if there's like 7 boys in a family, the last boy that's born is more likely to be gay by like 25% or something like that, which is really interesting because this shows some kind of genetic disposition to these kind of things. I mean, it doesn't, completely link it, but like nature.
Sorry. That's the opposite of genetics. If all the 7 boys were, because they all have the same genes, there'd be no difference between the boys. The last child, because it was raised in a family with lots of other boys, that is the influence.
Ah, I see. So you're saying that... Ah, okay, that makes sense. That's fair enough. Yeah, I get that. Fair enough. Yeah, I stand down.
No, it's a good question. It's the type of thing that gets asked all the time. It's not silly.
Cool. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yep.
And that something is what just happened now is extremely important. Everybody who's here, please be a practitioner of what just happened. First, please denounce any view that this is something to do with shutting down or blah, 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 you're right, you're wrong. But it is important that we are effective and we communicate about what we know. Right now, honestly, Harry, you said some shit I've not read or heard anywhere. That to me, it was already sort of, what the fuck, really? But then on top, again, Aiden shared something that I haven't thought either. So this, if anything, this is to me a double plus awesome because I got 2 kinds of input where I didn't think about it that way at all. So anybody else, if you hear one of us, anybody, talk non-referentially, or you know for a fact you've heard something that contradicts the information we're saying, you must interrupt and you must correct, or you must alter if you want to use the different terminology. But it's important that we do this, okay?
Yep, thanks, Lewis. All right, so if we're okay, we'll go on to the next question. Everyone?
I'm good.
Ready, gone. So next question, another one that might get interesting. 107, what is your take regarding overpopulation? Shall we go from bottom to top in the list this time? Actually, maybe one of the guys who hasn't written anything on the list, do you want to maybe have a go at it?
I can say what I think about it.
Yeah.
I think that I don't know if any of you have researched a very beautiful philosopher called Arne Naess. He believed in deep ecology and the idea of kind of being the idea of ecology obviously is like, you know, number of things, number of species in an environment or whatever. That's not the best definition of it, but that's essentially what it's all about. And he was the name deep ecology sort of resonated. What the idea was is that we should live one with nature, and instead of conserving it, i.e., you know, like sort of doing certain things to reverse what we've done, we need to preserve it, which is different from conservation. And so he was all about, you know, making sure the population was low. You know, he had, I think the number he actually put was 400,000, and that's what the actual planet can actually support with the kind of lifestyle that we are living, or something around that number. But finding that number is important, basically, to assure preservation rather than, you know, stopping using greenhouse gas and all these things. And I think the main thing I'm trying to say is that population is a huge impact on the damage that we do on the world, and I think that it does need to be reduced, and that's an important thing. That's personally what I think about it.
Cool, thanks for sharing. Anyone else, or Lidus?
Are we talking about the overpopulation question?
Yeah, do you want to try answering
it? Kill them all. No. Are we even overpopulated is the question, or is it just because money exists, we're only given the resources that exist in abundance to people that have the money to buy the resources? Like, you can go to if you go to Malawi, you can get like a big gigant. Well, you can get one banana for 10 kwacha, which is like a penny, and you can buy loads of them for like so many kwacha. But the people that live there only have like 50 kwacha a month, you know, for their pay or whatever. Whereas we can give somebody £1 and we can live off that for the entire, you know, month. So you've really got to think it is literally just a supply and demand problem, the overpopulation problem, because the people with less money can still buy stuff that are in the markets for people with less money. Yet if you go to a supermarket in the same, I'm getting sidetracked, but if you go to a supermarket in the same place, there's all the stuff's the same amount as it would be in this country. I just think that the problem is the resources are just not being available to the people that need the resources, more than there is an overpopulation problem.
Good. I agree. Harry?
I was just going to say that's interesting. In terms of like what everyone thinks, I want to know what everyone thinks about when the ideal system is there. Would we be concerned about reducing the population? Would that be something that's on the plate, or do people think that, you know, Jack's always said he wants to do the first thing that would ever happen is that he does a huge resource evaluation of the world and to see what's available so that we know what's there. Is that something that, do you think overpopulation or population limit would be something that would be talked about or discussed?
Yeah, well, I kind of touched this in my answer, so I don't know, maybe we can hold on a bit, or I think Nick wanted to maybe say something now.
Yeah, I was just going to say maybe we should get to the bottom of the answers, like get everybody's answers out, and then like that might answer somebody's question that they would have had if we'd not got all the answers out.
I was thinking that. It's a very good question, and we'll try and answer it here, but if we don't, ask it again afterwards. So, Lewis.
Okay, what did I say? Okay, a myth. Plenty of videos, articles, infographic reading, about the subject have been created and distributed. Not an overpopulation problem, a resource allocation and distribution problem. And that's, I think, basically the general conclusion that was sounding off quite loudly in most of those videos, articles, infographics, and such. Reason being, yes, one, I think Ryan, yeah, I think you touched on it. How come then the rules are different for the rich and not so rich? All of that shit. It's precisely that. Your question in itself is an answer, actually, whereby, you know, it's whatever. It's a recession, but you see Mercs and BMWs still rolling around. Nobody's selling that shit for scrap. What's the deal? So again, differential advantage. For you, it's a recession. For me, I just got a new jacuzzi, so fuck you. So in terms of resources, overpopulation, right? First, what's the population's values like? I would just love a baby. What the fuck for? Answer me that. Well, you know, it's just, that's it. If it's, again, that's the whole thing. So when, Harry, you asked the question about resource survey, the survey is not just that. It's going to be a survey essentially of all of this. Who's sick? What woods have burnt out? Where are the rivers dried up? What's the population's values like? If we built this geothermal thing, but they believe that God put coal here for a reason, how's that going to work? See what I mean? So same goes with I want a baby, and then slowly through introduction of different media, different values will be portrayed and shown, and the contradictions will be easily introduced into the people's at least conversations daily. Whereas now, oh, isn't this cute, the little nappies and shit like that, which are, one, costing you so much more money, two, this baby is literally not going to have the values which are relevant in the real world, but what values you think the baby should have. So all of that plays into a very just warped picture. No, personally, from what I've read, from what I've watched, all of this learning leads me to believe that even when people bring up NASA in 2000 whatever said that we need now 4 Earths to support our way of life, yeah, way of life now, with the resources and value systems we have now. Install geothermal, teach people that there's no such fucking thing as race, you know, then you have a pretty critically different worldview. And with that new worldview comes a completely radically different new thinking about what to do with that worldview. So I hope this is a kind of good enough answer as a shell.
Nick? Thanks, Lewis.
Yeah, I wrote, I don't have access to the facts and figures right now, so I couldn't tell you if we have an overpopulation problem. But I would imagine that we are more likely to have a resource management problem at present, not an overpopulation problem, since we throw loads of food away every day, etc. So, you know, I don't think the world is necessarily overpopulated, but as someone said, you know, like the first thing to do would be to have a quick tally up of the resources, the way of life, what we have now, and then react accordingly.
Was anybody going to talk at all? No?
Yeah, it's supposed to be my go. If you're going to be quick, yeah, just a quick comment, that's fine.
It was literally just saying, look at the amount of waste the US puts out a year, and it's enough to feed so many people. And then look at the amount of food we actually put out a day: bread, milk, everything, meat, and we just overindulge in it.
Yeah, you're completely right. There's tons of stats out there. For me, I'll try and jump over the bits that are the same as all the other answers before. So for me, it's a question of the socioeconomic system at the time. Using today's methods, you could say that we are heading towards overpopulation. I don't have the specific facts though, so I'm not going to say yes or no. Or it will, and for me, kind of, you know, these kind of things will just escalate to kind of right-winginess, you know, maybe even head to ethnic cleansing and stuff as things get worse and there's more and more population in this system. It could be bad. However, in an RBE, which is a much more interesting question, methods of science can be utilized to a degree of efficiency in our economic system, which allows us to accommodate more humans on this earth living to the same standards of today, or even much better. This may push. Jumps a bit. Still, within an RBE, there is still, you got to say, the more humans there are, the more strains there are on our resources. And although hopefully we've agreed such a level of efficiency that the number's now well off, but there will be a certain number where it's going to start having an effect on people's standard of living. Fine. So through that, will kind of like be kind of taken into account by education and kind of what the Venus Project actually says. I'm trying to remember it word for word now, but I can't. Is in, I don't know, maybe their aims and proposals. There is a thing that they say they would like to study the population of Earth as one of the things that they would like to do once an RBE has kind of got in. One of the main things of through voluntary education, through education and people voluntary kind of having less babies and all that stuff, study the population of Earth as it is, whilst we kind of take stock of what we have and design a culture that can accommodate so many people. And the bit about maybe they could reduce the numbers, they do talk about that at some point, and Jack has mentioned it a couple of times, that maybe in that culture they decide to take the numbers of humans down. Because we've automated most of this work, there's not going to be any worry that there's not enough people to do the labour to maintain your standard of living. So, I don't know, Jacques says a crazy number once, I think they could go down to 200,000 at some point in the future, but that is entirely down to the culture within an RBE, which we can't predict, really, what people decide to do or not. So that's me. Andy, you're next.
Yeah, I think overpopulation, I think it could be a problem like in the distant future, but it seems like it's far away, unless, well, then again, when you're talking about the system we've got at the moment, it seems like it could be a bigger problem, but then with the RBE, I think it would be a problem that would be, like, further down the line it would end up being a problem, but it probably would be quite far away, because of the way, if you're efficiently distributing, like, resources around, it's going to be it's going to take longer for that issue to become a bigger issue, I think.
And I speculate that with an efficient system of housing resource distribution and an educated population, an emphasis on education, there'd been not much need to control the population, and likely no population. I think Nick said it before, like but about drugs. If you can travel the world for free, if you can learn whatever you want for free, you can see the idols of history that have, like, they've not even had sex, like Isaac Newton. He died a virgin. When people are enthralled in something so much and they just want to understand this, like, I ain't got time for sex, I'm busy doing this shit. So maybe education is like the key. And I may be wrong in this, but I'm sure I saw somewhere, like, basically the more educated a society, the less children they'll have. If anybody's seen the film Idiocracy, it's kind of like stereotyped on there pretty well, just in the intro.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. I know Harry had a question that maybe we've answered or not. You could say that, or anyone else who hasn't chipped in before. Any questions, or anyone? Any questions?
I don't really have a question. I don't even want to address this again, and I just want to make a point. Teach people what it's like. Actually, one, give out contraception, and two, just let people know what it's like to have a kid. I've got three sisters and a brother. 3 of them are infants, and they're an absolute handful. Like, completely, like, you've got no spare time, you just can't do anything. To have a kid, you then need to give off a lot of time that you would have had, and I think just letting people know that would sort of solve it. just the sort of, you know, the amount of sacrifice you have to give when you have a kid.
I just also want to say as well about freedom of movement. I was also curious about how that would be a thing, like an issue. I think sure that'd be an issue maybe at some point. So I just wanted to think, see what people thought about that.
Sorry, Andy, immediately, if you could please repeat it. I just zoned out, honestly. All the words just sorry.
I was just wondering about freedom of movement, basically. Like, if there was an overpopulation problem at some point, and it got really bad, would freedom of movement, do you think that would be a problem? Like, to say if somewhere they had to like sort of spread people about for that reason or something, or I just thought that could be maybe something that they might think about. I don't know.
Well, yeah, freedom of movement is kind of there until there's no more rooms, and then there's nothing you can do. That's probably how it will be. If you have to evacuate people from one area or spread out population, then you ask for volunteers and you ask very nicely, and hopefully you get your numbers that you need. And of course, alongside that, build as many new houses as you can right now. That would just be going on, and like automatically that would be going on. If there's more demand for houses than there are houses, then it'll be in the system to make more houses straight away before it even became an issue. And unless you're getting into real, a meteor was landed and smashed a city or something, then okay.
I'm curious, Brian, do you want to go ahead of me?
If it's okay with you, I've not really got that much of a point to make. It's literally just create modular housing, as in you've got a house, like you've got, let's say you live in an apartment block, let's say if you live in an apartment block, it just gets slotted in to an apartment, into a slottable, as I said. Then you would just transport the apartment itself, which I don't know how you would go around that, but that would be the logical way to do it, just like a mobile home that just sort of attaches to a rail or something that's just a big interconnect. I don't know, something like that. There'll be ways around it.
I'd say that's appropriate. Also, one thing I wanted to definitely touch on is ideology. There is something that reality and physics allow us to do, and then there's this bit where, well, yeah, but I would like it to be, etc. And that's the tricky area. That's the uneducated, that's the emotional based decision-making system, which, as we've seen in the history, I mean, it's full of, but I think it should be this way. Bloodshed and people crying and poverty-ridden streets and shit like that. It's usually not a very appealing picture. So, again, I don't really know how many of these questions, when reduced completely down to their basic structures, will not end up sounding like this. If you only were educated. You know what I mean? Because I don't really understand how a person who knows how physics works, at least on its fundamental level, could arrive at something which is emotionally based when you understand that this thing that you breathe and this biology that you have will not allow you to do etc. which you would like those things to do. You can try to jump 11 stories high, but your body can't do that. So where do we go from there? So again, if we are understanding that we're going to have sensors in as many areas and as many structures as possible in order to give us feedback the most accurate way possible, then that's all we can work by, right?
I was just going to say, I just thought of this, and it's kind of like the whole overpopulation thing and the Venus Project. It's just made me think at this point, and like, there's a tendency for me to see, like, and I used to do it myself, but like to think in excess as someone who supports the Venus Project, to think that you can just take all this stuff and make all this crazy stuff, and it's like I want like as a mathematician like, and like, as a computer scientist and all that, I feel like it's always good to find the simplest and the most resource efficient solution as well, and it shouldn't just be about like making everything like extravagant and stuff like that. And I think overpopulation is one of them. Like if we can minimize the amount of people on this planet, as I said I think earlier in the comments, like we can extend how long we have, because let's be honest, there probably is a planet out there that has resources that we could use, and we probably will eventually find something like that. But we do also only have one planet, and like we don't at the moment, all we know is one, and we need to look after it, and like that might be extending its life for as long as possible so that we can find other planets to go to. And I think overpopulation, you know, arguably we do need to reduce the amount because of that exact point.
Yeah, I was just going to add something. Yeah, it depends also on technology, because the whole overpopulation. Because if let's say we're able to burn half the world's resources in 1 year, but we have technology to restore that whole thing in 6 months, let's just say, we're good. What's the problem? We actually have a surplus. So it's also about how can we restore what we burn, not how many people we have. So I don't know the answer, but overpopulation, but it's a pretty bad thing, we all know. But for now, I don't think we have an overpopulation problem. It doesn't seem, but we definitely have a management problem, managing resource. We waste a lot of things, and so there's a lot of people needing resources in one place, and there's a lot of resources being wasted and just thrown away in another area. So it's just about getting the resources to people, managing it all. So that's what I definitely know we have a problem.
Cool. Oh dear, guys, it's getting late and we've got a whole other question after this one, and it's a big question. What we might do is do that next week. But for now, I'll read out the real question off the website. It's quite a long one again. So TVP FAQ.
Sorry, but
Yep.
So are we essentially just cutting it after this? Because I think not everybody sort of contributed and stuff like that. Sorry, Michael.
Sorry?
Did you actually hear me?
I think if we like blitz the answer to this question, then like try and blitz through the next one, and like just then we can cut the hangout, and anybody that wants to stay in and discuss it can discuss it. Then,
I think Aiden's hung.
No. So was Aiden gonna read the last answer out?
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to do it? Ludus, Nick, anybody?
Okay, I'll try. Let's see. Overpopulation. All right. Okay. TVP FAQ 107. What is your take regarding overpopulation? One thing that is very rarely considered when dealing with the issue of overpopulation is the inefficiencies of our current socioeconomic systems' ability to cater for the needs of all people. It's far easier for those in power and those conditioned by this system, especially those in established academia, to blame the state of the world on a growing population rather than on an archaic socioeconomic system and a global value system based on infinite consumption on a planet with finite resources. We don't have an overpopulation problem. We have a failure to intelligently distribute our existing resources and a value system disorder that wastes those resources at unsustainable levels. In a resource-based economy, we would no longer have this inefficiency, and the values of those who adopt this system would be the complete opposite of consumerism. People would understand, appreciate, and consider the available resources of the planet over and above their material desires. We would be utilizing our resources efficiently, and we would be producing goods that last and would be designed with product cycle in mind. and be made recyclable where possible. Correctly managed, our current state of resources on this planet would more than cater for current population, and many times that, at a much higher standard of living for all the world's 7 billion people, and this ability to cater for a growing population would only increase as our technical ability to create an abundance increases. Combined with relevant education as to the impact child birth rates have on the resources available to care for the population, as well as complete freedom to be educated in any field, to travel anywhere in the world, and to take part in any activities that interest us, people will be far less likely to want to stay at home and raise families. It is no surprise that the highest birth rates are in the countries that have the least education and the least social and economic opportunities available to the people of that country, combined with high income inequality. Fuck, that was a mouthful, man.
Aiden, you back, man?
This is not my impressed face. Alright. Thanks, Lewis, for reading that out for me. So I got it right, Michael. We're going to blitz the next question and then go for it. Alright. I'm going to set a little timer. We're going to have, what do you reckon, a minute to answer it each? Or 30 seconds each?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Alright, and what I'm going to try and do, sorry, this isn't going to be exactly fair, but I'm going to set up some sort of ticking clock, and when it runs out, your time's up, okay? So, let me just type the order we'll go in, then I don't have to go for it. I don't have to say anything. Yes, it's exactly like countdown. And once I get my sounds ready, alright, so we'll have that will go on, okay? And that's like a couple seconds. So the question is, can someone find the question? I can't scroll fast enough.
It's,
What is
what is TVP stance on personal possessions? Andy.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, so, yeah, okay, sure. Let's just go for it, okay?
So, I think the general stance is to give everyone access to resources they require whenever they need them. So, why should products that are used on occasion be kept at home? With access to local resource centres, it would be a more organised system, and no one would have to worry about lack of availability if everyone understood the system and cooperated. If I only played tennis on Saturdays, for example, I wouldn't really need to keep the racket and ball at home. It would save me space, and it would be used by other people that could play. Like if they play through the week, they could use it. That's kind of an example. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought about it.
I don't know where Dan's gone, but I don't believe in personal. I think everything should be collectivized. I think but I do think there should be an exception. I think if you've made something on your own, or somebody's given something that they've made on their own as a gift, I think that should be an exception to the rule potentially. That's my opinion on it.
Harry.
Oh, sorry, I thought. Oh, it's Harry, right?
No, Harry's just gone. Hiri, you're next.
Oh, sorry, okay. I think it would be surpassed by, it would become obsolete, personal possessions, mostly, because things will be designed with, let's say, shareability in mind, and optimized for shareability, let's say. I don't even know if this word exists, but yeah, because it's more efficient, I think.
Right, yes, okay, me. seems to be behavior handed out to us by media, old people, and our parents. If one starts to investigate the checkout system Fresco talks about, akin to the system libraries use, then the notion of I must own an object becomes an I have access to this object anytime I need it, thus changing our thinking about access, ownership, objects, and how all these concepts interact. Also, I think, Harry, what you touched upon is exactly what Jacques talks about.
Yeah, I got access over ownership. I'd rather have access to a music studio than a load of instruments, which for the majority of my time are either in my way or lying idle when I'm not playing them. And the ideas of gifts, I think, is like Christmas and birthdays. I think I'm hoping that'll die out.
Yeah, most things we own are often replaced. Things would be built to last and easily upgradable in a resource-based economy. And as Andy said, a lot of things are purchased for one or two uses, like a camcorder for a wedding, and there's no need for that stuff because it will be there. So having access to stuff is obviously far more efficient than just hoarding stuff. But hey, if you want possessions, you can own your clothes, you can own your cooking pot. It's not like it's going to be outlawed. There doesn't need to be a rule. If you want to keep the camcorder in your house, you can.
Personally, I think the personal possessions are they're personal for a reason. Like stuff that is one-time use, fair enough. Like go in, take it out, use it, put it back, and just keep all the data or whatever. But there's some things that are personal, like a PC or a wallet. Wait a minute, why am I saying wallet? You've just sort of got to bridge a gap between stuff that you would keep on your person and that is your keeps personal stuff on it, and then you've got stuff that you would just use. That's really it.
Nice. Stephen, you want to add something? No, alright. Yeah, me, exactly right, Ryan. I was just going to touch on, of course, everything's everyone's, yada yada, you have access, but don't take my shit. Like, if I'm making a model, you can't just come and take the screw out of it because you need a screw. Like, but that is social contracts. That is part of the culture which we brought up in. There's obviously no law that says you can't do that. You'll just stop being their friend. So inviting them around your house next to your stuff. Fine. And cool. Alright, so was the plan now to read the answer off the actual website before we stop the recording for today and then go on to questions? Stephen, you have your hand up like you want to talk.
Yeah, no one would come and take your screw out of the model because they can get a screw anywhere they want.
Exactly. Exactly. Alright.
We all go round to Aidan's house and nick all the screws out of his models just to pee him off for fun.
You can do, as long as you like put them all together to make something really awesome, and you surprise me with it. Alright. So I'm just finding the FAQ. So it's quite a long FAQ. If everyone's alright, I'll try and blast through it as fast as I can, or if anyone is very good at reading and speaking at the same time, they can shut up.
Do it, Nick.
You're still muted.
Yeah, okay, I'll read it if you want.
Thanks, mate.
Question 107. What is your 108. What is the TVP stance on personal possessions? Ownership and possession are methods fostered within the monetary system for very specific reasons. It promotes their use as a tactic to sell as many products to each individual as possible. When you can't afford to purchase a product, there is an option of going into debt in order to acquire it. And as long as you have the standing to pay back the needed loan with interest, these methods are promoted to maintain and perpetuate the monetary system. If you even acquire a certain amount of wealth to possess the things you need, there is always the need to acquire more to keep up with those of higher wealth to maintain greater status. Those who own more and acquire greater opulence are more admired and reinforced with greater success and worth in this money-based society. It creates an atmosphere that encourages individuals to strive toward more and more material gain and accumulation as a form of measurement for one's self-worth and value. Essentially, the possessions one achieves, the more value they have. This is true within today's society because the more ability or money they have to purchase more possessions, the more control they gain over the environment and other people. Others become indebted through jobs or their time and energy to those who have wealth just so they can acquire money to get the possessions they need. A resource-based economy does not value people by their ability to acquire, possess and accumulate material objects. In fact, it's not part of the equation at all. It is a right of every person to be able to have access to the necessities of life, which include all of the goods and services that a highly productive and technologically advanced society can achieve. There is no need for constantly purchasing goods, as the need for money is no longer relevant and the perpetuation of society does not depend on the need to buy products. There is also no need to coerce the public through psychological advertising or emotional appeal, making people feel inferior if they don't have the latest, often worthless product. When one analyses the current need of having a job in order to acquire the money to purchase these possessions, we begin to realise that it is not the job that we need or want, as we are taught to believe, but more precisely, it is the access to the products that the job will potentially provide. It is not that we need to possess objects. What we really need is to have the use of products when we need them. This is achieved through access centres within every city. Goods would be acquired from central distribution in the cities and are also available on call or near location of needs or interest. One can simply have access to what they need when they want it. You can think of this as being similar to the public library of today. For instance, if you are at a ski resort, you don't need to lug a pair of skis and other equipment with you as you travel there and back. Instead, the highest quality skis are available for you and everyone else on site and can be returned whenever you are finished with them. Since there is no ownership but access, there is also no need to make things intentionally so they wear out and break down to perpetuate a market. Since there is common heritage of all resources, you can think of this as everyone having access to everything and only of the highest quality, so the durability of all products would be made to last. This would finally permit society to conserve significant resources, reduce waste to a minimum, and enable more to be produced to assure that there is enough for everyone's use, thus conserving energy, resources, and consequently protect the environment. We would no longer be plundering the planet for resources for the perpetual need to sell and maintain today's planned obsolescent approach. This would also mean that you would not have to work for years to acquire the goods you need to live. There is no need to insure them, to maintain them, have bars or safety devices installed on your home to protect them, or have to replace them. You can understand how ownership is really burdensome and a tremendous waste of our finite resources. To summarise, it is far more humane and life-supporting to use a system based on universal access, for it dramatically lowers waste and redundancy, eliminates envy, status hierarchies, and all ramifications of a lack of self-worth that goes along with that, whilst increasing efficiency and resource management to enable everyone on the planet to have access to all things they need in order to have a dramatically higher quality of life.
You want to have a break, mate?
I think so. I know I need a lie down.
Thanks, Nick. You saved me on that one. That is long. But I can sit here and listen to you all day. Alright, I guess this is the point where we'll stop the broadcast for now. And because I know I myself, I have to go. It's far too late for me. But all the new guys, thanks for coming along. Feel free to message me, Mick, or Lilith after the Hangouts if you want to come back for more, or if you have any questions about what we're doing or anything like that. And of course, well, if anyone wants to, this Hangout will stay here so you can chat amongst yourselves. So thank you everyone for watching the recording. I'll stop that now.